I walked into the Sunnyvale Estates HOA clubhouse expecting to smell warm apple cider and see twinkling Christmas lights strung exactly 3 feet high per the covenants. Instead, I found HOA President Karen Whitaker and her treasurer Steve sitting at the long mahogany table like they were running a corporate takeover. But this wasn't any normal holiday potluck. Spread across the table where the casserole dishes should have been were official-looking papers with bold red letters at the top that made my stomach drop. Final lien notice, property enforcement action, foreclosure proceedings initiated. Steve was leaning back in his chair with the biggest, nastiest smile I'd ever seen, like a cat that had finally trapped the neighborhood mouse. Karen sat next to him, fidgeting with her precious engraved gavel and avoiding my eyes completely. The Christmas tree in the corner suddenly felt like it was mocking me with its perfectly approved red and gold ornaments that Karen herself had personally inspected last week. "Merry Christmas, Emily," Karen said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she used like a weapon at every board meeting. "We have a little present for you." "You see," Steve continued, standing up and circling the table like he was delivering a TED Talk on community standards. "Karen and I made a little bet. I told her that when we handed you these papers, you'd break down crying like all those entitled residents do. You'd probably beg us not to lien your cute little house. Maybe even get down on your knees right here on the clubhouse floor." Karen finally looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that turned my blood to ice. It wasn't regret. It was pure excitement. She was actually enjoying this. "Residents are so predictable," Steve sneered, crossing his arms. "Especially homeowners like you. You think you're so smart with your little marketing job, but when push comes to shove, you're just another weak rule breaker who can't handle following the covenants." The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. The rest of the board wasn't even here. They had planned this whole ambush for when we'd be completely alone. They wanted to watch me crumble without witnesses who might actually feel sorry for me or question their sacred authority. I walked slowly to the table, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor like a countdown. Both of them watched me like hawks, waiting for the tears. Steve even had his phone out, probably ready to record my breakdown so they could blast it in the private HOA Facebook group as a warning to others. I picked up the pen lying next to the papers. It was Karen's fancy silver one, engraved with President Whitaker protecting our values. How fitting. "Where do I sign?" I asked, my voice steady and calm. Steve's smile faltered for just a second. "What?" I repeated. "Where do I sign? These are lien papers, right? So where's my signature supposed to go?" Karen's mouth fell open. "Emily, don't you know what I mean? Shouldn't we discuss this?" I flipped through the pages, scanning for the lines. "Discuss what? You've clearly made up your mind. You even got your treasurer here to bet on how I'd react. So let's just get this over with." Steve recovered fast, his nasty grin returning. "See, I told you she'd try to act tough at first, but just wait. The tears are coming." I signed the first line in clear, bold letters, then the second page, then the third. With every stroke, I watched Steve's confidence crack like cheap stucco. Karen looked like she was seeing a ghost. When I finished the last page, I set the pen down and reached into my purse. They both leaned forward, expecting tissues. Instead, I slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "Since we're exchanging Christmas gifts," I said with a smile that drained the color from both their faces, "I have something for you, too. What do you think was in Emily's envelope? Drop your guesses in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because this HOA Karen story is just getting started. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next." 3 months earlier, I was still living the lie that my place in Sunnyvale Estates was fine. Every morning, I woke at 6 to mow my lawn to exactly 2.5 inches. Karen had sent me a certified letter about the previous week's 2.6 inches. I'd edge the sidewalk with a ruler because the covenants demanded military precision. I'd repaint my mailbox the exact approved shade of heritage blue after Steve personally measured it and declared the old one off by a quarter tone. I told myself it was just HOA life. That's what good residents do, right? They make excuses for the board. The house had to look spotless when Karen did her weekly wellness checks. I'd spend evenings after my marketing job scrubbing sidewalks already clean and pulling weeds that didn't exist. If she found one dandelion or one Christmas light hung 0.2 inches too low, she'd shake her head and mutter, "My previous neighborhood never looked like this," even though everything was perfect. Steve started showing up more often, clipboard in hand, demanding I bring out the trash cans earlier or tone down the holiday spirit. I wasn't his servant, but I did it anyway because I didn't want another $500 fine. Karen never told him to back off. She never stood up for any resident. The worst part was how they started talking to me like I was stupid. I have a college degree and run successful marketing campaigns. But Karen would explain simple rules like I was a child. "Emily, when you plant flowers, you need to check the approved color palette," she'd say slowly, like I'd never read the 30-page covenants. "I know the palette." "Karen, do you? Because last month you approved Lisa's pink flamingos and fined me for neutral pansies." The flowers have been fine, but I stopped arguing. It never got me anywhere except more lectures about paying better attention to community standards. Then came the night that changed everything. Karen had left her phone on the clubhouse table after a board strategy session with Steve. It kept buzzing. I was going to turn it off, but I saw Steve's name. The messages made my blood run cold. "Dude, that Thompson woman is so pathetic," Steve had written. "The way she runs around trying to please us is embarrassing." Karen replied, "I know, right? She's too stupid to realize we're done tolerating her. But it's kind of fun watching her scramble. You should just lean her already. Put her out of her misery soon. I'm working on something. She's going to be so shocked." These rule breakers never see it coming because they're too busy playing perfect homeowner to notice what's really going on. I stood there in the empty clubhouse reading message after message where the HOA president and her treasurer mocked everything about me. My lawn, my lights, my intelligence, even the way I smiled at meetings. They called me pathetic and joked about how easy it would be to drive me out. That's when I realized my place in Sunnyvale Estates wasn't just threatened. It had been over for a long time, and I'd been the only one trying to save something already dead. But instead of confronting them, I put the phone back exactly where I found it and walked home. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I started planning something that would make both of them regret ever underestimating the weak resident. The Monday after I found those texts, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a private investigator. My hands shook as I dialed the number I'd quietly Googled at 3 a.m. Rodriguez Investigations. "This is Carmen speaking. Hi, I think I need help," I whispered, even though Karen and Steve couldn't possibly hear me from their McMansions. Carmen Rodriguez turned out to be exactly what I needed. Former police detective, specialized in white-collar crimes and homeowners association fraud. When we met at a quiet coffee shop outside the neighborhood, she looked like a sweet grandma, but her eyes were razor sharp. "Tell me everything," she said. Notebook ready. I spilled about the fines, the texts, the way they'd been slowly tightening the noose with special assessments on elderly neighbors. Carmen listened without judgment, asking questions that made me realize I'd ignored red flags for months. "Your board has been pushing extra fees on retirees more often lately, right?" "Yes, almost every quarter. They claim it's for emergency roof repairs, but the roofs look fine." "And you mentioned the money disappearing?" That's when I told her about the HOA bank statements I'd quietly photographed during a public records request. Charges for consulting services to companies no one had ever heard of. Cash withdrawals labeled community enhancement. When I politely asked Karen about them at the last meeting, She'd snapped. I handle the finances here. Emily, you don't need to worry about things you don't understand. But I did understand. Money was vanishing faster than Steve could approve new fines. Carmen's investigation started immediately. She followed Karen and Steve for 2 weeks, snapping photos and recording meetings. What she uncovered was far worse than petty rule enforcement. Karen and Steve were running a full-blown scam. They'd been awarding fake contracts to shell companies they controlled, promising luxury landscaping upgrades and state-of-the-art security systems that never materialized. They convinced elderly residents to pay voluntary special assessments by showing doctor documents and websites Steve had built. Your president and treasurer have skimmed over $250,000 from at least 12 different households, Carmen told me at our next meeting. Most of those people are on fixed incomes. They've lost life, savings they thought were going toward safer sidewalks. I felt sick. The woman who preached protecting property values. Every meeting was stealing from grandparents who trusted her because she wore pearls and spoke in that sweet Karen voice. But that wasn't even the worst part. Carmen slid a folder across the table. Karen and Steve had been planning to lien my house specifically to distract everyone while they drained the remaining HOA accounts. They'd been spreading rumors that I was mentally unstable and a danger to community harmony so that when they foreclosed, no one would believe anything I said about the missing money. Inside the folder were printed emails where they laughed about recording my breakdown at the Christmas ambush and using the video to prove I was hysterical. They'd already scouted condos in Florida for their retirement once the neighborhood was bled dry. I sat there staring at the evidence, feeling my world crack. But beneath the shock, something else ignited, like a fire that had been waiting under all those perfect lawns. If Karen wanted to play dictator, I was going to show her what a real strategist looked like. While she thought I was just another compliant homeowner with a little marketing job, I had been quietly building something that would change everything. It started 6 months earlier when my sister Emma called with an idea that sounded insane at the time. Emily, you're wasting your talents fighting these fines alone, she said over coffee. You know more about digital marketing than most so-called experts. Why don't you start your own firm focused on HOA defense? I laughed at first. With what money? Karen controls the narrative here, and Steve would never let me succeed. Then don't tell them. Emma said simply, start small, work from home, and watch what happens. That's how I met David Shun, a web developer looking for a marketing partner. Emma introduced us through her law firm. He was nothing like Steve or Karen, quiet, respectful, and genuinely excited about my ideas. I created a complete strategy for his tech consulting business, website, social media, targeted ads that actually worked. Within 3 months, his clients tripled. He offered me full partnership, 50-50 ownership of everything we built. I was terrified to say yes. Karen had spent years telling me I wasn't smart enough to run anything beyond my own lawn. But something inside me knew this was my way out. We launched Shun and Thompson Digital Solutions with $5,000 I'd hidden from my regular paycheck. I told the board I was working late at the office while I was actually meeting clients and building our brand. Emma handled the legal paperwork, making sure everything was bulletproof. The business exploded. We specialize in helping small businesses and, secretly, residents fighting abusive HOAs. Word spread fast. Within 4 months, we had 20 clients. Within 6, 50. David handled tech. I handled marketing and client relations. We were the perfect team. He never once made me feel small. You're brilliant at this, he'd say after every campaign launch. The money rolled in faster than Karen could find me. By the time Carmen was digging into their scam, my personal shares sat in accounts they knew nothing about. Over $1 million and growing. But the money was only part of the plan. While setting up legal structures with Emma, I discovered something delicious about my own house. When I bought it 8 years ago, My credit was flawless, and Karen's husband had just been denied a loan for his own place. To close the deal, we put the title entirely in my name. Karen and Steve had completely forgotten that detail. Legally, the house was mine, untouchable. Emma quietly transferred other assets too. The car, my retirement accounts, everything I could protect without raising flags. "You're not stealing," Emma assured me. "You're just shielding what's already yours." By the time Karen was planning her Christmas ambush, I owned a thriving business worth over $2 million, had my own cash reserves, and held legal title to almost everything they thought they could lien away. They had no idea the pathetic resident had already built an empire behind their perfectly trimmed hedges. 2 weeks before Christmas, I overheard the phone call that lit the final fuse. I was supposed to be upstairs wrapping presents for the board gift exchange, but I stood outside Karen's home office door, listening to every venomous word. "Christmas Day at the clubhouse is perfect," she was saying, voice thick with glee. "She'll never see it coming. Emily loves these holiday events more than anything. She's been baking cookies for weeks like a good little homeowner." Steve's laugh crackled through the speaker. "That's evil. I love it. She's going to be crushed." "That's the point," Karen replied. "I want her completely broken, so she won't fight the lien. If she's crying and begging in front of the camera, she'll sign anything. And you're sure about the bet?" Steve, $50, says she sobs within 5 minutes. "Residents like Emily are so predictable," Karen sneered. "She'll probably throw herself at my feet and beg the board to reconsider. It's going to be pathetic." "I should record it," Steve suggested. "We can play it at the next poker night with the guys. They'll love seeing the troublemaker finally melt." "Do it. But make sure you get her face when she realizes her perfect little life is over. I want that moment when she understands she's losing everything." They spent another 20 minutes detailing the plan. The other board members would be conveniently visiting family. The clubhouse would be empty except for the three of us. They'd lay the lien papers out like a twisted holiday gift, complete with Karen's fancy pen. The best part, Karen crowed, is that she still thinks everything is normal. She's been smiling and following every rule like a good little resident. If only she knew I'd been planning my own surprise for months. After that call, I phoned Carmen immediately. "They're serving the lien papers on Christmas Day," I told her. "They want to record my reaction and humiliate me." "Perfect," Carmen said, surprising me. "Let them think they're in control. Meanwhile, we'll be ready." She introduced me to her friend Marcus Webb, an investigative journalist who specialized in exposing HOA and financial scams. Marcus had been hunting for a story exactly like this. "If you can get them to confess on camera," he explained in our secret meeting, "we can bury their entire operation." I had the perfect risky idea. What if I wore a hidden camera to the ambush? They were planning to record me anyway, so extra equipment wouldn't look suspicious. Carmen loved it. She gave me a tiny camera disguised as a button on my red dress and a recorder that would capture every word. The plan was simple. Let them serve the papers, sign calmly to throw them off, then hit them with my envelope. But it wasn't just evidence of their scam. Emma had prepared counter-documents, legal appeals, and a civil lawsuit that would freeze their personal assets once the fraud came out. Since the house is in your name and you can prove they diverted HOA funds, you have grounds to claim damages, Emma explained. Plus, once the criminal charges hit, no judge will side with them. I spent the week before Christmas acting completely normal. I baked cookies for the potluck, hung my lights to the exact approved height, and even hummed carols while Karen did her final inspection. Every smile I gave her was part of the plan. The night before Christmas, lying in bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pure excitement. Tomorrow, Karen and Steve thought they were going to destroy me. Instead, I was going to destroy them. Karen and Steve stared at the manila envelope like it might explode. Their confident smirks had vanished. Karen's hand trembled as she reached for it. Steve had gone pale enough to match the approved white trim on the clubhouse walls. "What is this?" Karen whispered. "Open it and find out," I said, settling back like I was about to enjoy the best show of the season. "Consider it my Christmas gift to both of you." Steve tried to recover his cocky attitude. "Whatever game you're playing, Emily, it won't work. You just signed the lien papers. You have no power here." I laughed. The sound made them both jump. "No power? That's funny. Karen, why don't you tell Steve about my house? You know, the one that's entirely in my name because your husband's credit was trash 8 years ago." Karen's face went sheet white. She'd forgotten. Steve's voice cracked. "That's impossible. Open the envelope," I repeated. Karen's hands shook as she tore it open. First came the stack of photographs. Karen and Steve meeting elderly residents at coffee shops, handing them fake investment brochures, pictures of them at the bank depositing checks, shots of them celebrating at 5-star restaurants with money skimmed from HOA accounts. "Where did you get these?" Karen demanded. "Keep looking," I said calmly. "There's more." Next was the thick folder, bank records showing exactly how much they'd stolen and where it went, copies of the fake contracts, screenshots of the texts where they mocked victims and planned my humiliation. Steve grabbed the folder, eyes widening. "This is how did you?" "I hired a private investigator 2 months ago," I explained. "Carmen Rodriguez, former detective, very good at her job. She's been following you both and documenting everything." But I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone and showed the active recording app. "I've also been recording this entire conversation, including the part where you admitted to betting on my reaction and planning to humiliate me. And Steve, remember when you said residents are predictable? That's going to sound fascinating to the FBI." Karen looked like she might faint. "FBI? Oh yes. They're very interested in your little investment scam. Stealing from elderly homeowners is a federal crime. You're both looking at serious prison time." I reached into the envelope and pulled out one more set of papers. "These are counter documents too," I said, sliding them over. "The ones my lawyer's sister prepared. Since my house is legally mine and you've been diverting HOA funds to personal accounts, I get to keep everything, and you get the lawsuits." Steve was frantically flipping pages, desperate for an escape. "You can't prove anything. These could be faked." I smiled and pulled out the final card, Marcus Webb's business card. He's the investigative journalist who's been working with Carmen. His story about your scam drops next week. I'm sure the rest of the neighborhood and your employers will be very interested. Karen finally found her voice. "Emily, please, we can work this out. I'll call off the lien. We can go to mediation." "Too late," I said, standing up. "While you two were planning to destroy my life, I was building a new one. I own a business worth over $2 million. I have my own money, my own house, and my own future. I don't need your approval anymore." "Karen, I never really did." The room was silent except for the clock. They sat there staring at the evidence, finally understanding they'd been outplayed by the pathetic resident. "Merry Christmas," I said, walking toward the door. "Enjoy explaining this to the police." 6 months later, I was sitting in my beautiful new home office. Sunlight streaming through windows I no longer had to measure for compliance. The garden I planted myself bloomed exactly how I wanted. No approvals needed. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Did you see the news?" I opened the link and smiled. There was Karen's mugshot on the local station with the headline, "HOA President Sentenced to 6 years for Elder Financial Fraud." The article detailed how she and Steve had been found guilty of embezzling over $320,000 from Sunnyvale Estates residents. Once the FBI got involved, they uncovered even more victims. 12 elderly homeowners had lost retirement savings to the fake enhancement projects. During the trial, I sat in the back row as victim after victim testified. One grandmother cried, describing how she'd lost the money for her husband's medical bills. Karen tried to blame everything on Steve, claiming she was just following board procedure. But the texts, bank records, and my recordings painted a crystal clear picture of two people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. The civil case wrapped up even faster. Karen's lawyers tried to fight for access to my assets. Once the criminal charges surfaced, no judge would touch it. I kept my house, my car, everything. Karen was left with nothing but legal bills and a criminal record that ended her community service career for good. My business with David had grown beyond anything I imagined. Chun and Thompson Digital Solutions now had over 100 clients and 15 employees. We'd moved into a real downtown office with my name on the door. David and I had become more than partners, too. We'd been dating for 4 months. He treated me like my ideas actually mattered. "You're amazing," he'd say after every big win. "I'm so lucky to work with someone this talented." It felt strange to be respected instead of constantly policed. We sold the old house within a month of the divorce from Sunnyvale Estates. Yes, I formally withdrew and helped dissolve the worst of the covenants. I used the proceeds to buy a smaller, brighter home in a quiet neighborhood with no HOA. Every room was decorated exactly how I wanted. Bright colors, comfortable furniture, 0 approved color palettes. I'd also done something that felt incredibly good, using part of our profits. I set up a restitution fund with Emma to help the elderly victims recover some of their losses. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Sometimes I think about that Christmas ambush and how different life would be if I'd cried and begged the way Karen expected. I'd probably be living in a tiny apartment, fighting endless fines while she and Steve sipped cocktails in Florida with stolen money. Instead, I'm successful, independent, and genuinely happy for the first time in years. The best part? I learned I'm stronger than I ever knew. All those years of Karen telling me I was weak and stupid were just lies to keep control. The truth is I was smart enough to build $1 million business, brave enough to take down fraudsters, and strong enough to rebuild my life completely. As I sit here planning the next expansion of the firm, maybe even a new division helping residents fight abusive HOAs, I realize Karen actually did me a favor. By trying to destroy me, she forced me to discover just how powerful I really am. And that was the greatest gift of all. The neighborhood group chat, once Karen's personal propaganda machine, exploded with messages the day the story broke. Former victims thanked me privately. One elderly couple sent flowers with a note. "You gave us our dignity back." Even some former board members quietly admitted they'd been afraid to speak up. The new interim president, a quiet accountant who'd always hated the micromanaging, immediately repealed the most ridiculous rules. No more measuring grass with rulers. No more finding holiday lights by the inch. No more wellness checks that were really power trips. I laughed reading the updates. The same people who once nodded along to Karen's for the community speeches were now posting memes about her mugshot. Dark humor at its finest. Turns out when the queen loses her crown, the peasants throw a party. Steve tried one last desperate move, showing up at my new house with a pathetic apology bouquet. I left it on the porch for the squirrels. David and I took a celebratory trip to the beach. No covenants, no fines, just us. He proposed on the sand at sunset, and I said yes without a single second thought. Our wedding will be simple. Backyard. 0 approvals needed. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me something the covenants never could. Real community isn't enforced by gavel-wielding Karens. It's built by people who respect each other instead of policing each other. I still run into ex-neighbors sometimes. They always ask the same question. "How did you stay so calm when she handed you those papers?" I just smile and say, "Because I already knew the ending." And that, folks, is how one resident turned an HOA Karen's Christmas ambush into the most satisfying revenge story in suburbia. If you enjoyed this tale of dark humor, sharp satire, and justice served colder than a December lawn, Smash that like button. Subscribe for more HOA Karen dramas. And tell me in the comments, what ridiculous rule has your HOA tried to enforce on you? Until next time, stay free, stay fierce, and never let them measure your grass.